Hello, everyone. How are you doing? My name is Dr. Rihanna Rogers. I apologize about that delay. My computer crashed. So I want to welcome you to the hashtag Black and Brilliant second panel on breaking through the middle. So thank you, everybody, for being here, and welcome to those who have come back. So tonight is going to bring together a variety of new panelists to discuss and continue the conversation that we had started last week about breaking through the middle. If you recall from our last presentation, we were really talking about the co-founder of hashtag Black and Brilliant, Tony Efkin, brought up the idea of how do you enter into the C-suite? And so there's been an interesting dialogue that has transpired since that time, a few months ago when that post was originally put on LinkedIn, about what are strategies and ways that you really can break through the middle, that you really can find and strategize, really how is it that we can connect with people and move forward our careers. So tonight, as we did before, we have asked the panelists the same series of questions. The first question was, what are your 5 tips and tricks for breaking through the middle? And so that's going to be a point that people are going to be discussing today. So I'd like to move forward in this slide as well, and then I'll introduce you to our panelists. So before we begin, I'd like to start on what is hashtag Black and Brilliant? Well, it's a loose network of people from all backgrounds whose intent is to make an impact on corporate hiring and promotion processes through the leveraging of our networks. Our true goal is to establish a unified effort for people of all backgrounds to get more Black and brown people into leadership positions in the industry. So I think that's important for you to keep in mind. I also want to remind you on this slide that all comments are going to be collected in the chat box. And if you would like to speak to a particular panelist, please put the @ symbol in front. What I'll be doing as time persists and allows us, I will interject some of these questions into the chat box. So next slide, please. So just to give you a brief outline of today's opening dialogue, we will have this brief introduction. So I'll tell you a couple more ideas that came from the prior panel. And then the remainder of the time will really be focused on the panelists. Each panelist has been given 8 minutes to speak to their understanding of how to break through the middle. And so we will be moving through the order that you see here: Leah Harper Elaine, Ndidi Origi, Tim Allen, Deidre Smalls-Landau, and Maurice Nicholson. And then we will have a short period of time for closing Q&A. So I just want to remind all panelists, when you're not speaking, to make sure that you mute your microphones. And for all panelists, for all attendees, please write in the chat box. So with that being said, I'd like to move to the next slide and give us a little bit of an opening frame. As I mentioned before, we are talking about breaking through the middle. As you know, there's been quite a few articles that have come out lately about the difficulties in which Black and brown peoples, a broader term in which we call BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, and peoples of color, have found moving through the middle a difficult process. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing tonight is really discussing ways in which and strategies in which we can utilize to do so. So without further ado, since we have a great illustrious panel, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Leah Harper Elaine, who's principal and executive producer of Strong Brew. We have Ndidi Origi, Senior Vice President of Advertising and Program Standards at NBC Universal Media. We have Tim Allen, VP of Design at Airbnb. We have Deidre Smalls-Landau, Chief Marketing Officer and EVP for Global Culture, UN Worldwide. And finally, we have Maurice Nicholson, Director, Performance Ads, Production, GMT, and Strategy of Operations at Google. So thank you very much. And now I'm going to pass it off to our first panelist, Leah Harper Elaine.
Can you hear me? I believe I'm unmuted now. Hi, everybody. I'm Leah Harper Elaine, and a lot of you know me out of New York. I'm the principal and executive producer for a company called Strong Brew. We specialize in broadcast live events. So I am kind of approaching this from more of a live entertainment event perspective. There are several of us on this panel that come from the media perspective. I likely have a little bit of a different story because I leaned in early into the freelance market. So for the first 15 years of my career, I worked my way up through the freelance market in New York City. And so that kind of adds a little twist and difference to how corporate America was structured in my mind. And basically I would spend everything from 2 years to 2 months on various projects. And what it forced me to do during that time was really master my skills as it came to building relationships and just figuring out how to navigate, connect, and create long lasting relationships. And when you have to do that in a very quick sprint, you get really good at it. And I did master that technique. So throughout my years, the 15 years I was in New York, I really was able to build a very vast network, but then in addition, also a very loyal one. A lot of the projects we work on, you kind of run fast and deep and they're very intense. And the communities that you build out of them are amazing communities. So I'm really here to speak to you about kind of how to build your community, how to find mentors, and how to kind of stay connected throughout your process and as you go up through the end of your career. So tip number one I have is be strategic about your career path. I feel like a lot of people, especially in the freelance market, kind of just take jobs as they come, and they don't really put any planning tools involved to actually setting goals for themselves and accountability. So don't just look to what step B is, look towards your entire future and create a successful plan for yourself where you're creating steps and you keep moving your goalposts throughout your career. If you don't take kind of a vested interest and agency within your career strategy, you won't get or know what your end goal is, and it'll be whatever's handed to you. I really believe too that no matter what you have to do, you have to bring your A game. I know that's like a hard thing to say because what is an A game? If you're not delivering your best every day and you're not at the top of your class, you won't be seen and you won't be considered. And so I always tell my mentees, just bring your A game every day. And it's hard, it's grueling, and it's grinding, but it definitely pays off. And also kind of in this same vein of using, strategy as part of your career development, you also need to know how to like read a room and absorb what people are telling you and soak it all in. That allows you, with all the inputs coming your way, to kind of master your industry, not just your job. And if you can master your industry and all the inputs coming at you, you will be catapulted into management positions, senior management, and then hopefully leadership from there. So that's phase one, be strategic about your career path. Two, identifying allies. I know the term ally has been used a couple of different ways, so I'm framing what I mean by an ally. Allies are anybody that you encounter during your career path. So when I start a gig or, take on a new client, I'm constantly evaluating everybody in my landscape and determining who are my allies, who are going to be the people that help lift me up. And I think a big category that's looked over is peer mentorship. And that's something that everybody can do now. And that's something that can happen on every level, right? So if you're junior or if you're senior leadership, peer mentorship, best thing that can happen to you. The great part about peer mentorship is those people rise with you, even if they're not in your own companies, but outside in different industries as well. And right now, all of my peers are now in senior level positions. They're all hiring managers. So we now exchange at a different level than where we started. So your peer mentors grow with you. There's also a difference between kind of internal sponsorship and mentorship. And that has been something that Rihanna and I have been discussing a lot, our host, regarding what's the difference between sponsorship and mentorship. The big differentiator, and everybody needs both, so I'm not saying choose one or the other. Sponsors kind of live within your industry or live within the company that you are working within. They are senior leadership that can help lift you up and kind of open the doors for you. Everyone needs to find a sponsor. And I know it's hard. I know it seems kind of impossible to make that jump. Why would they want to talk to me? Now is the time. If there was ever a time, people are listening and people are open. So now's your time to go out and seek a sponsor. And then mentorship, again, this could be a peer mentor. You can be a mentor, and I'll talk about that in a second. You can be a mentor, you can be a peer mentor, or you can find a mentor. Mentors mostly operate either in your company or outside in the global industry. So if you see somebody in advertising and you work in banking, but you admire their career path, you can solicit them to be a mentor. I put a call out to everybody who is on, listening to this panel. If you have an hour a month, offer it up. Find a mentee, reach out to somebody in your company, donate the hour, but start now, because again, this is our time. Building your reputation is number 3 on my list. Social currency, it kind of sounds a little gross, but it's a real thing. Your reputation matters, and building your reputation and building your social currency matters. Engage with your network online via social channels, post articles, attend conferences, try to sit on panels, and position yourself as an expert in the industry. Leveraging and expanding your network. This gets tricky, but if you follow steps 1 through 4 or 1 through 3, 4 should be easy. Leveraging your network. That means getting on LinkedIn, connecting with people, adding a note, don't just connect. And when you connect with people on LinkedIn, make sure it's an even exchange. If there's value going both ways. So that note is going to be critical for somebody to not just deny you. And I think I have time to get in my very last point. Just lean into your confidence. And that's the hardest part, I think, for anybody who's out there trying to get or gain more or grow within an organization. There's going to be no's, lots of them. There's going to be no responses, lots of them. Just get comfortable with the ambiguity, get comfortable with the unknown, and just keep pivoting and try again. So that's what I've got.
Thank you so much. We actually have 1 more minute within your time. So I wanted to ask you a little bit of a follow-up about sponsorship. How would somebody really find a sponsor or find a mentor? What's the suggestion?
My suggestion, again, it really does rely on your allies, right? For sponsorship and mentorship, because it is a 2-way street, you're relying on people who know they're not going to waste their time on you. So you need to have either approved yourself or you need to be vouched for, which sounds convoluted and complicated. But if you work your network and you start to develop, even starting with a series of goals for yourself, you want the following 5 goals in the next year. Start with that and start to shop that in your immediate network and see who they know then they can come back to you and say, you might be a good pairing for X and Y, right? And you bring 2 people together. So I think the trick to mentorship is finding like a commonality between people, and starting with your goals as a mentee is a good place to start. So that mentor knows whether or not they're a good fit to help you reach those goals. And I would say same for sponsorship. Just it's trickier when it's within your company. Those people are, I don't want to say accountable or responsible for your promotion and growth, but they are. So you need to flex that relationship and start curating it before they can actually be your sponsor.
Great, thank you so much. Now on to our next panelist, Ndidi Oriji.
Thanks, Rihanna. And Leah, those were just nuggets, just so many wonderful golden nuggets. I was trying not to take notes because I'm supposed to speak next. So I'm Ndidi Oriji. I work at NBC. I lead a team that's responsible for reviewing all of the advertising, basically all the content that airs on our broadcast network, our shows, advertising, as well as on our cable networks and our new streaming network, our streaming service, Peacock. So I've got my 5 nuggets. I'm going to get through them. So my very first one is don't give up your power. And this is something I learned in a really concrete way years ago, where I had an idea at work that people were really excited about, and I was excited about. And one just afternoon, an older white guy in the office, he sort of sauntered into my office and he said, "Hey, great, we're going to both co-chair this idea that you had." And I was really upset, so I just sort of, got out of the conversation. And I called my mentor and I just told her, she was a Black woman outside of my company. And I told her, I was like, he just came in there. I can't believe he did that. I'm like complaining, he's trying to take my idea. And she just stops me and she goes, was he your boss? And I go, no. And she goes, does he have any other power over you at work? And I said, no. And she said, so then what's the problem? And I was like, oh, you're right, there is no problem. And that lesson really showed me that you can't give people more power than they have over you. And even if he had been my boss, you always have power in a situation. And it's all about trying to figure out how to leverage that. And I know as Black people, as people of color, as women of color, you're often in those situations where you will feel like, okay, what was that? Was that person trying to undermine me? Was someone trying to take something that I'd come up with and claim it as their own? But rather than spending much time trying to figure out what that person is doing, if they really don't have that much power over you, or even if they do, you need to sort of change your mind and start thinking about what you were trying to do in the first place. Because what that does is that it takes away your energy and your focus from what you were trying to accomplish, and it makes it into trying to figure out what that person is trying to do. And in that particular situation, once she asked me those questions and I thought about it, I realized, actually, yeah, he doesn't have any power in this situation, but I do want him to buy into this idea because I want him to support it. And so I just went back to him and I said, no, actually, I'm going to chair it. However, here's how I'd like you to be involved. And it was fine. Tip number 2, you need people. I think that this one is so intuitive, but I do know that we all tend to sort of gravitate toward maybe 1 or 2 people that we're really comfortable with. It may be your spouse or your best friend or someone at work. And that's the person that we go to with every single thing, you know, complaints about our boss, or I need to, you know, ask for a raise, and, you know, what's going on within the company if there's somebody that you work with. But what I found is that you really have to get a lot of people. And I'll give you all an example. There's a guy at work who I work with. He's in his 50s, white guy, very different. Just looking at us, you'd be, I'm tall, Black woman, he's a shorter white man. You'd just be like, oh, those are complete opposites. However, in speaking with him just at meetings and things like that, I just felt like we just connected where somehow, you know, I'm like, oh, he's really cool. And so we just would talk. And then at some point he suggested, why don't we do monthly check-ins just to kind of talk and see what's going on in each other's, you know, work lives. And then from there, we've been doing that for, you know, a couple of years now. There's no specific agenda. There's nothing that, you know, we really have to talk about, but it's more about understanding that he has access to, you know, information, people, networks that I don't have access to, not just because of who he is, but also because of the type of work that he does, which is different than what I do. And I'm the same for him. And so it's a great way of sort of exponentially expanding your network if you can keep that in mind as you meet people. And a little bit to what Leah said, you really just can look at people who you already have a natural connection with. You don't have to go and force something. My third strategic tip is to be relentlessly curious. Don't stay in your lane. I work in a really, really niche area, S&P. I didn't even know it existed before I came to NBC. However, you better believe that I understand what business affairs does. I understand what legal does, the programming and entertainment teams. I am relentlessly curious about what other people who touch on what I do, and even those who don't, because by doing that, that's how you're able to make connections. That's how you're able to say, oh, I understand, I can actually work with you on this project, or this might make sense for you to come into. 4th tip, understand how to advocate for resources. If you've been doing all these things, you're going to get more work, which is great. And again, as a Black person of color, you're like, yes, they trust me, they think I do good work, they're giving me more work, but you need to stop and assess what resources you need in order to do that job really well. And one of the things I say is, I don't say no to work, but I will lay it out for you. If you give me this budget and you give me this head count, I can do this. If you can't do that, here's what I can deliver. And that way you're setting expectations, and you're also making sure that you have the tools to succeed, and you're not in a position where you're just taking on work and not actually getting the resources to do it the way that it should be done. My last one is do other things. This one I cannot stress enough. I had a t-shirt company when I came out of law school. I did comedy for 10 years. I just launched a language program for kids. I'm Nigerian. Shout out to all the Nigerians. I'm seeing all the names, Nigerians in the chat. And none of these things am I the best at. I'm not going to be the funniest comedian you've ever seen. But my point is that when you develop these other parts of yourself, you will just naturally have a positive feedback loop back into your work and into the rest of your life. And anyone that you see that's up there and you admire and say, oh, this is a person that I want to be like when I grow up, you tend to find that they have a whole other life and a whole other thing that they do that feeds into their work. That's it.
Thank you so much. Those were really great points. So on to our next panelist, Tim Allen.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Tony, and everybody that it's not a part of it. So proud of everybody. So my 5 items are as follows. It's great to hear everyone else's as well. One is to fall in love, and I'll go through each one of these as I go through them. But 2 is have as much fun as possible. 3 is to deliver. 4 is focusing on making other people better. And the 5th one is what got you here won't get you there. So first, falling in love. Fall in love with what you do again, if you're not in love with it already. And more importantly, why you do it. So like understand and get passionate about the core history of whatever your craft is. My craft is design, and I'm just a student of it. I'm fascinated by every aspect of it. Not only just because it's my job, but I just love I just love everything about it. If you're great at what you do and you fall in love with it and your team doesn't understand or respect that, it's probably a good sign that you may not be in the right place or the right team or even the right company. I think if you look at my career journey, you'll see that I've sort of oscillated between corporate roles and agency roles, small companies, large companies, tech companies, marketing companies, so forth. And, it's all been this journey on understanding what makes me happy and what makes me passionate about design, which leads me to number 2 is place yourself in a position to have fun. Once you're truly having fun at something, and once you've sort of mastered a craft, the more pleasure you're going to have in doing it. And so, that pleasure, that joy that you have in practicing your craft, whether that could be strategy, that could be it could be design, it could be whatever, is contagious. And other people will benefit from that. Your work will benefit from that. The easiest way to kind of shortcut yourself into having fun is to kind of scare the crap out of yourself and place yourself in a position where everybody around you is kind of significantly, quote, better than you at whatever that craft is. Obviously not better than you as a human being or as an individual, but for me, that's been Adobe at a certain point in my career. That definitely was RGA at a certain point in my career, and surrounding myself with, some of the best designers and strategists and, folks like, Tony Effick, which that's where I met Tony. That was a pivotal point in my career as well. The more that I made people around me sort of better and affected people with that passion, the higher I rose in terms of seniority and in terms of responsibility. 3, focus on delivery. Just draw a solid, objective line between your own contribution and a business outcome or several business outcomes. And once you have that solid line, that's your lifeline into promotion, into career growth, into lateral movement and upward movement as well. But you got to establish that like very clear shared also understanding, attribution, and some sort of business outcome. 4, focus on people, make other people better. That's usually kind of like just it comes implicitly when you love what you do and you're passionate and you're having fun. So follow steps 1 through 3. And number 4 is pretty easy. You want to make other people around you better. That's so rare that it becomes pretty. you become outstanding, I think, when you start doing that. And then fifth, what got you here won't get you there. There's a whole book about this. I think there's several books about it, but at any given point in your career, you're going to have to start over with steps 1 through 4 of what you're doing, because the next level you won't get there by doing what you did to get to the point you're at already. So you have to understand where that is. The author of that book, I'm not sure of, but it's what got you here won't get you there. It's a great book. But yeah, that virtual ceiling, you want to make that your floor. So for me and my career, it's always been like, hit the ceiling, make it your floor. Hit the ceiling, make it your floor. Just find ways to start new over and over again. And yeah, for me, I haven't really been able to like find a ton of great sponsors and mentors, because I guess it's just been always focusing on my craft. So obviously a lot of the points were focused on craft for me, but I'll end right there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So we have 1 minute, and I wanted to ask you a follow-up question about leveraging your network. So you talked about moving upwards and kind of building block off your career. Were there options for you to leverage people in your network when you wanted to move somewhere?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I talked about making other people better. As many times as I've moved, it's always been from going to work with someone that I either was managing and, help them get better either in their craft or promoted them in some way or help them get to that other job, or even with when recruiters reach out to me, best advice I can give is to just, even if you or your role, talk to recruiters, talk to other people, help them, with your own network. That it's karmic. It'll come back. Again, like every position I've had, it's always been through a connection or someone that I've helped.
Great, thank you so much, Tim. So now we're moving on to our next panelist, Deidre Smalls-Landau.
Hi, sorry. I also have little kids running in and out of my room, my location. So sorry about that. So my name is Deidre Smalls-Landau, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer and the EVP of Global Culture for What I'd like to share, you all, Tony, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. I think this is wonderful what you're doing. And the panelists that have spoken thus far have been fascinating. I agree with everything. I was shaking my head when I wasn't on camera trying to keep my daughter from showing up without a shirt in Zoom. So what I like to say is we are all on a journey, and how I view my career is as if I'm painting a canvas. And so when I think about what goes into painting those canvases, painting a canvas, is thinking about sort of life lessons and things that I've learned along the way. So I'm going to sort of frame everything within that context. And some of them were captured from the other panelists, and some will be probably, I think, something that as people of color, we don't like to hear, but I think it's important for us to hear. So the first one is have a purpose bigger than yourself. And I think Tim talked about it as love. Love for your craft, love for how you're helping to shape the world or what you're contributing to the world, I think is important. And taking yourself out of it and thinking about how can you change that situation? How can you bring something to it? What drives me on a daily basis is that I am creating a new world for my daughters. I'm creating a new world of opportunity for for the Black community, the Black and Brown community. What drives me is when I get an email from a colleague at the office and they say that, Deidre, you don't know what your position really does for me. It speaks volumes to me. And so that I'm driven by this bigger purpose in reshaping the narrative around what access really looks like and how we need to get there. And I think in doing that, you have to you have to really approach your career as a career and not as a job. And think about it when you get to the place of perceived access, because we believe we have access, but I often think that there are lots who are pulling strings, so we have to be mindful of that. When you get to that stage, you have to recognize that to whom much is given, much is expected. So you have to operate with that key in mind, that you can't get there without actually reaching back and providing support. So that's the first one. The next one is really be willing to fail, because failure leads to success and it propels you to make the next move. And I think that's probably an unpopular one that I've often shared, because as Black people, Black and Brown people, we're trained to succeed. Our parents say you have to succeed. This is what success looks like. But when you think about athletes, when you think about children are pressured to fail when they're riding a bike. Oh, ride it, fall off, get back up, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get back up there and do it. If we think about all of like Simone Biles and her crazy moves, she tried that because that's a different point. When we're thinking about sort of the idea that we're failing, we're thinking about it's not enough, we have to get to the next level. And I've had, you can look at your failures and they can, if you want to make it softer, you can call them mistakes. I don't care what we call them. I think it's just learning that failure is okay. And it helps you if you learn from it and if you use it to propel you to the next stage of your career. The next one is be uncomfortable with the status quo and challenge yourself to do something about it. And I think someone might have referenced this earlier, but I think this idea of comfort is the enemy of greatness, because when you become comfortable in your space, then you know that you're not being challenged. You know that you're not getting to a place of greatness, and you know that you're sort of just at the baseline of delivering what you need to deliver. When we think about, as I mentioned, Simone Biles, I attribute it to a different life lesson, but she has signature moves that no one has ever seen before. And it's because she became uncomfortable. She became uncomfortable with the status quo, and she challenged herself to do something about it, to introduce something that felt like she was changing the narrative around where we need to be. So that's the third one. The fourth one is, and I'm a huge proponent of this, is be willing to be authentically you and speak your truth. I show up exactly how I am. I show up committed to sharing my truth and being authentic in my truth, whether that's how I look, the bright lipstick that I wear, what I say in meetings. I had another colleague say to me when I was promoted to CMO, she said, she actually, and this was a year ago, she actually sent me an email just recently, and she said, Deidre, when you got up in the town hall and you said, y'all, I just knew that you were there for me. And I said, oh, really? I don't even remember saying that, but that's just who I am. But that spoke volumes to her and people of color and others, that I'm not trying to sugarcoat a facsimile of who I need to be for corporate America. And I think for too long we might have done that, and I think there's an opportunity to shift that. So being authentically true to who you are is important. The last one is find a sponsor and ask for what you want. Too often, I've grown up in my career where I have actually been, the saying for people, Black people, is work hard, not smart. I think white people often use the work smart, and my husband mentioned that to me. And so that's a fallacy for me to work smart. Is I have to work hard. So within that concept, when you get a sponsor, you don't want to ask for anything. So my sponsor found me, and my sponsor, my first interaction with him, he retold the story to another colleague and said she didn't ask for anything. And I said, "Oh my God, I'm supposed to ask for something? Okay, let me think about that. Let me build it. Let me come back with my list of asks." And from that point on, I go to him and say, "This is what I want. This is what I'm looking for. This is where I need your help." And I think that's a cultural thing that we have to sort of unhinge from our being, is that we have to ask for what we want, even if it's not related to a sponsor, but being able to step boldly into that.
Thank you so much. Those are really, really great points. And I hope we have time to come back towards the end of this, but we'll be moving on to our final panelist of the evening, Maurice Nicholson.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me. So I'm Maurice Nicholson. I'm the Director of Performance Ad Products at Google. I lead the strategy and operations for that group. And so just a little bit of background, if you think about the search ads or the video ads, I'm in charge of how those are commercialized and the back end plumbing of that. To just come at it from a little bit of a different angle, I'll talk a little bit about how you navigate sort of big corporations and how you move up. I mean, we've heard a range of approaches from a variety of different backgrounds here, and they all make a ton of sense. I can just offer you my perspective. And I think of myself a little bit as a product. And the question is, how do I get Maurice the product off the shelf and moving up and up and up the ladder? And so, in thinking about it that way and reflecting back on my career, my 5 points are a little bit different, but there are a lot of similarities. So the first one is develop an expertise. I think as leaders at the mid-level in corporations aspiring to move up closer to the C-suite, overall performance is assumed, but having a spike or something that you're known for is really important. One, it makes you stand out, but two, more importantly, it gives you a bit of a power base. It creates a unique value for you to that employer that they can point to and say, hey, if Maurice goes away, or if we lose him, if we don't take care of this talent, we're losing something material. Because at that mid-level, heading up to the C-suite, there are tons of talented people, but you want them to feel like they're missing something special if you were to leave. The second thing is to develop a reputation for said expertise. And this is one of these cases where I say, don't do as I do as I say, because I can't say that I've always done this in my career, but in reflecting, I could see the power of reputation building and having other folks sing your praises, right? And come to you to get the benefit of your expertise, whether it's in problem solving, whether it's in business development, whether it's in leading large organizations, or the art and craft of your particular business. I think that's really important to build that to help you stand out as a brand. I think the third thing is in moving away from you and now thinking about the organization, I think it's really important to start having some honest conversations with people around you, particularly senior HR folks. You want to understand how you're perceived. How are they talking about you in performance evaluation conversations, in those calibration conversations? And who's the person or who are the people who pound the table for you, right? Who are the folks who say, you know what, that Maurice, we want to see him move forward. He's done a great job. And I'll come back to some of my experiences with that. I think the fourth thing is you want to establish a performance contract. I think, the performance evaluation process in a lot of corporations affords us an opportunity to say, hey, these are the goals that we have for this next year. But more importantly, what are the goals that I should have as I think about moving up the organization? And if I do these things, is the organization committed to me and committed to moving me forward? So I think having that explicit conversation does two things, right? It makes your work plan really, really clear. But number two, it's a signaling mechanism to the organization that you're somebody that's ambitious and that they should pay attention to. And when you make that ask, as Deidre has mentioned before, people tend to want to deliver against it. And if not, you have information that you should do something with that information if they're not committed to that sort of implicit contract. And then the fifth thing I think is really important. We've spoken about the importance of mentors and the importance of sponsors, and those are really, really important folks to have in your network. So I won't belabor those, but I'd like to add another entity into that mix, is the advocate. The advocate is somewhat different, at least in my mind, than the sponsor, because the sponsor could sort of say, I'm looking, I'm going to open doors, but the advocate is somebody who's really a bit more senior to you in that organization, and they are really committed to pounding to the table to, if you deliver, to helping you move up. In my experience, I've seen, and I myself have experienced this, where folks have delivered the results, and then you find out you don't have an advocate. And so as you're chasing that one seat, and there's three folks, without an advocate, your chances of getting that seat are diminished. So I think that's really, really important to have somebody in your corner. It's very hard to sort of manufacture. Those relationships come early, but oftentimes that conversation with HR, once you raise your hand and say, I'm a leader that wants to move up the organization, the word gets out, and sometimes advocates will show up that way. I want to talk a little bit about the network. One of the questions I think that was suggested that we address was the network, how to leverage that network. And for me, I think I've been really explicit about leveraging my social media channels, starting with LinkedIn as the hub. And I think thinking about myself as a brand, I think about what's my marketing plan. And my marketing plan is, what's my personal brand or brand character, my brand identity? Am I known as the leader of teams and the developer of people, or Maurice is the problem solver? I've developed a brand around problem solving, tackling big issues, strategic thinking, and then leading teams to drive change. And then I figure out where I want to go. What does that look like? What's the path to this point of arrival? And then I think specifically about who can help. And so in thinking about that marketing plan, then I segment my network, and I think about who are going to be my counselors and my advisory board. And then I think about who are going to be my sources of opportunity. And those opportunities are career opportunities, nonprofit opportunities, board opportunities, these sorts of things. Where my sources or access to platforms to tell people a little bit more about what I do and help me shine, and also help others shine. And then within my network, I think about who are the subject matter experts in my craft that I can tap into to keep my personal learning journey going, to build my credibility. Because all of this advancement through to the C-suite needs to be founded on excellent performance. And that doesn't happen just on your own. There are lots of folks in our network that we should be tapping into. And I place a lot of emphasis on developing that expertise. And then lastly, and this is an interesting one because I've just come to this late in life, like, who's my consigliere, right? Like, who's that guy that I can come to in a moment of vulnerability, or I've got a challenge. I shouldn't say guy, gal, whoever, that I can open up to, share some of the deep challenges I'm dealing with, and know that I've got a trusted advisor to help me through these things. Now, for a lot of folks, they can hire that person as their chief strategy officer or strategy lead. But for us, sometimes we don't have that ability because of, perceptions. I ran into a situation, a friend of mine is a C-suite executive at a major telecom, and he wanted to hire me as his CMO for his division, but he couldn't because he feared, it's already tough enough him being the Black guy there. And he was a little nervous about having me as a CMO. How would that look? So what we do is we serve as consigliaries, and he serves as a door opener, platform builder for me, and we reinforce each other. And maybe one day we'll work together. And then, so as you think about this segmentation of your network, then I think about what's my communication plan for each. What are the pieces of content I'm serving? How often am I reaching out to them? I create almost like a Salesforce-like tool to create a tickler to make sure that I keep that network activated, and I offer them help so that when I need to draw upon the network, it seems altruistic. It is altruistic, right? I practice altruism. I think it's really important to put money into the bank before you draw out of the bank.
So I'm going to jump in really quickly. Yes,
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you so much. I wanted to jump in really quickly because I think that we have a few minutes left for the panel overall to address a few points that have been brought up together. So there's a couple of things that were highlighted uniquely throughout the panel. And I want to pull this back to a couple of things that I think broadly frame this. One, the big thing we're talking about is if you want to break to the C-suite, you have to commit to Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And the ways in which you commit to these various individuals is through the recognition of a variety of things that you've heard in now the two panels. Now, I want to challenge a question and a point here, and then I'm going to pose this to the entire panelists, and we'll go through the same order again. And then we'll close out with our next panel session, which will be happening the following week, and I'll give you details on that. But the challenge is really we've talked about ways that you can do this as an individual. But how do you challenge the C-suite itself? How do you challenge the executive level to make more opportunities so that individuals, BIPOC, can actually succeed in moving forward? So I know it's a really big question, and I know we have a few minutes, but I'd like to see if we could go down the line again. And if you could come up with a minute response, what do you think are some strategies that you can do? That would be great. So let's start with Leah. Go ahead.
Okay. That is, I think, the tough question that we've all been asking and has been on the table now for the last few months. I've heard everything from KPIs to just figuring out ways to create accountability, right? So in my sector, more on the entertainment side of things, I believe we're going to have to take a bit more of a grassroots approach to it, to be honest, because we are an industry that operates without a lot of rules. If you operate out of the union space, the non-union space is a massive piece of the industry, and it's very much unregulated, and it's very much behind the scenes. So our C-suite is distributed, and it's quiet, and it's secret, and it's exclusive. And so we pose a whole different set of challenges than other industries do. Every industry has its own challenge, and I think every industry is going to need to explore solutions within their own space or within each company. And on my end, we've been talking about, is it contractual? Is this something that we're talking about a certain percentage of your staff and crew need to be, BIPOC? And we've looked at it from building it into our own independent contracts with companies and with networks. So forcing distribution channels to kind of uphold these rules of engagement. But we haven't come up with a solve that's been universal. It really does take those of us who are in the C-suite within our own industries or at the top of our industries to kind of force the issue internally and start hiring and making a bigger stink out of it when we aren't hiring with intention. So that's from the entertainment perspective.
Thank you so much. Ndidi, what do you think?
So Dr. Rihanna, as I call her, this is my father was a professor for many years until he retired. This is such a professor question because this is a deep and a broad question. I approach it in this way. I think that I fight not every day, but every week, let's say, I fight to not be in a place that is cynical when it comes to what corporations can and will do. I think that in this moment that we're in, it is a moment that everyone should seize, right? From all of us on this panel who are at certain places in our careers to folks who might be starting out. You could be an intern at wherever you are. Seize this moment, because one of the things that I think is, yes, you definitely need a sort of strategic, big picture plan for, like you said, challenging the C-suite to make a real commitment. But I also think that all of us have to make a commitment, and it needs to be something that you don't allow to sort of be like a flash in the pan, right? And I think I'm not the first person who's thought that about this particular moment that we're in, right? Not wanting to get to the point where people move on, and to be honest, where we move on, because it's like, okay, well, we've had all these other things, and life is crazy. Let's keep going. So for me, I think that for there to really be real change, there has to be that individual responsibility. And just to make clear, I'm saying everyone. I don't think that it is the responsibility of Black people to, make sure that there are more Black people in the C-suite. There aren't that many. So who's going to do that in the first place? So I think it's the responsibility of white people who are in those in those positions of power to make the changes. But I think that individual commitment has to be there. And that's something I don't have an answer for, because I don't know how you have people, become committed in that way. I do say that one light that I see is the fact that this moment has caused people to discover things that, many of us have known forever, and others are just now discovering it. And that gives me hope, because I think once you make the discovery, then you can sort of move forward to figure out what it is that you're going to do about it. And it's much harder to pretend or just to remain ignorant. So thanks, Dr. Rihanna, for that very big question.
No problem. That's what I'm here for. Tim, please go next. What are your thoughts?
Thanks, Rihanna. I think about challenging the C-suite like I do almost everything else as a design challenge. And everyone has first answer to any design challenge is to understand your user base, your audience. And in this case, it's business people, different businesses, different corporations, different constituents have different goals. But once you understand those goals and those motivations, speak their language, frame solutions within their perspective, not yours. I think that's key. Kind of, you're still trying to put first the efforts of sort of your people and the impact that diversity and inclusion can have on an organization or on a product or on a corporation. But it's through the lens of what others see it as important. The great thing is that, harnessing human diversity is a viable solution no matter what their goals or motivations are. So it's really about framing. And so, once you can say that, I understand that X, Y, and Z are important to you collectively. In my experience, I just seen shoulders just kind of drop. So people just it disarm people when you actually understand what it is truly that there is important to them. And then you can go into, well, here's how we can further those interests by harnessing what makes in unique ways. Here's how it leads to more innovation. Here's, X, Y, Z. And then also, what is exactly what it will take to get it done too. I think if you've gotten this far, that's cool. But a lot of times I've seen it sort of get that far and sort of like, hey, let's brainstorm around this. I'm glad we all think that, getting more Black people in here is going to be a good idea. But usually, here's a path of that will contribute to our motivations, contribute to the business. Here's the ROI of that path. Here's a small, medium, and large version of that effort. Here's exactly how much it's going to cost, the investment of resources, of capital, so forth. And then, finally, just make it a yes or no. I think all those check boxes make it so that executive committee can just say, well, yeah, let's not do this one, but let's do that one. I think once you get to conversation, obviously people have understood it, people have been disarmed, as it were. Oh, this is like, I understand in a language, and it's based on my goals and outcomes. I've had success doing those.
Great. Well, I wanted to let everybody know really quickly, and we're going to move on to Deidre and Maurice if they'd be willing to stay on, but we've reached our time, and I know it went very, very fast. So I wanted to do something really quickly before we ask Deidre and Maurice, for anybody who needs to leave. Alyssa, if you could put up the final slide just really quickly so anybody can see the ways to stay in touch with #BlackandBrilliant. I wanted to highlight just really quickly and thank the panelists all for being here. And I hope that Deidre and Maurice will answer this question too before they get off. But it's been a great conversation today. We are going to continue this conversation through our social media platforms. You can find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, and you will find a recording of these sessions posted shortly. So please make sure that you check back to #BlackandBrilliant to see our next upcoming events. The next event that we were going to have is next Tuesday, August 11th at noon. We will have two panelists, Herman Stewart and Dr. Alan Mandel, and you will learn more about them. So I'm going to pull this back down and say thank you for everybody being here, but I'm going to allow Deidre and Maurice to answer the question as well. So Deidre, please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know why this is here. So the social contract with Black America has been broken. So I think what we need is, in corporate America, is a new contract with Black and brown people. And I'm saying it figuratively, but I really do believe it in a tangible kind of way. As I mentioned before, ask for what you want. So I think we have to ask, we as leaders, Black people in organizations who are in positions of power, to lead and have the conversation, need to take it upon ourselves to actually lead during this time. As painful as it is, as troublesome as that thought is, and sort of the burden of having to sort of be the affected population and also have to lead in this time, it's incumbent upon us to put those new deal terms on the table. So if we're thinking about a new contract, the contract is representation, bonus, sort of pay, pay penalty, for example, or making sure that C-suite understand that their pay or bonus is tied to diversity, I think is a necessary part of driving accountability. So where we can drive accountability, we have to do that from either talking about talent with respect to C-suite inclusion of Black and brown people, or whether we're talking about supporting small businesses. We have to create the the ecosystem of demands in order to help the organizations that we are in move further down the path of closing the wealth gap. Although we will never close it in our lifetimes, we have to do our best to make sure that we are part of helping to drive that for Black people. And that is heavily reliant on creating accountability, as well as creating a system or cocoon around Black people as they enter into corporate America and take their journey through middle to senior level positions, to give them the mentorship, the coaching, and the sponsors that they need, because mentorship is very different than sponsors, and coaching is very different than both of those. Coaching is, we're inviting people into this political game that we play in corporate America, but we're not giving them the tools to succeed. And if you think about, and I think John Rice says this perfectly, he's from management leadership training, and he is he went to Harvard, and he talks about this idea of coaching, where we're the only profession that is unlike sports, where if you come into the league, you get a coach, and that coach trains you and helps you get better. We haven't provided that safety net for Black people. So we send our Black people into corporate America and they leave. So we have to get better at creating that safety net.
Thank you very much. And Maurice, any final thoughts for us?
One, I want to echo Ndidi's point. It's very difficult to do this without the larger society participating in driving this change. It's, given our representation at the C-suite, like racism overall, if we want an improvement, we can't do it without them. So we definitely need to keep the pressure on the majority population to help drive this change. I won't repeat a lot of the great points that were made earlier in the interest of time. I totally agree with them. I'll just try to be additive. And the thing that just jumps out at me, and I just, again, think back to my friend where we're talking about how we could team up, is we have to change the perception of what the C-suite looks like. I mean, it sounds sort of Pollyanna-ish, but if you think about in culture, in pop culture, or even if you think about looking at stock photos in Shutterstock, if you see a CEO, it's a picture of a white guy. And if you see his right-hand person, it's always another picture of a white person. And somehow we've got to change the perception of what the C-suite looks like to sort of lay the groundwork or make the ground more fertile, so that when we plant a seed of a senior person that's ready to ascend, that they actually stick and they sprout and they grow. I had the opportunity to watch one of the most interesting C-suite transitions in history. I was working at American Express, and I got to see Ken Chenault's ascension to CEOship, and it was for those of you who remember, it's a groundbreaking experience. I was working very, very close with him and corporate strategy team, and I remember just sort of making notes of like, how did Ken do it, right? How did he navigate this highly political organization? And also, what happened to the other people who didn't get that seat in this Game of Thrones, right? Because there were plenty of other folks who were just as qualified. There were folks who might have been 10 years younger and they realized they needed to leave. There were folks that performed well and hit a speed bump, and they didn't have an advocate to sort of help them navigate past that. Ken had everything in place. He had the capability. He delivered the performance. He had the next opportunity at the next level in front of him so that he could then move up and perform. So he had this unfettered path. And then he always had somebody pulling him along. What was interesting was when he got there, I think he did a fairly solid job of sort of elevating Black folks around the organization to senior roles. I think, at least in his tenure, there was a bit of a struggle to get other Black people sort of close to his inner circle. And what I would love to see is a world where And again, there's so few of us Black folks in the C-suites today. But I think those few of us that are there, it would be wonderful if we could just figure out how to pull another Black person into that C-suite in sort of a consigliere, advisor, strategist role. So folks get used to seeing one Black person advising another Black person in a very successful organization. And again, we've gone from this point like a decade or 15 years ago where there were many, not many, but more than there are now, Blacks in the C-suite. But I think there's an opportunity in this moment where we're recognizing the historical wrongs to overcompensate. You say, you know what? Maybe the next Black CEO should be very explicit about hiring a Black chief of staff, a Black chief revenue officer, a Black CFO, because those folks are out there. So I'll leave you with that.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to say overall, thank you again to all of the panelists. Thank you for staying on a little bit longer to answer the questions. And for the audience that's here, thank you also for staying on and asking some wonderful questions. As I mentioned before, Alyssa, if you could pull back up the information about our social media. If you want to continue to stay in contact with us, we will have another session this next week. You'll see that posted shortly. And again, we're going to continue this conversation about breaking through the middle. As you know, it's timely and important and something that many people are striving to do in their careers. So again, thank you for everyone being here. I look forward to seeing you again at other sessions, and I hope that you have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you.